This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Build a better website with Squarespace. Alright, it's time for part 4 of the Man of Steel rewrite. I hope you guys have been enjoying it so far. If you haven't seen parts 1, 2, and or 3 yet, now's a good time to go back and watch those, but I don't know, maybe you're busy. So here is a quick recap of everything that's happened so far. If you don't need it, you can go to this time in the video. Okay. First act was pretty similar to the original Man of Steel. Story still starts on planet Krypton, although there's a lot less of it. Jor-El and Laura Lorvan have a son named Kal-El. A general named Zod attempts to overthrow the Kryptonian government because the planet is dying and they aren't doing anything about it. Jor-El launches Kal into space so that Kal can escape the dying planet. We don't hear anything about a codex or anyone killing anyone else, that's all we get. Flash forward 25-30 years. Kal, or as he's known on Earth, Clark, is bumming around the world, finding himself and using his superhuman abilities to save people from disasters. He learns about an alien ship in the Arctic. Clark travels to the ship and on board learns about Krypton from a hologram of his father. Jor-El tells Clark that a Kryptonian general named Zod is on his way to Earth and Clark needs to find a way to stop Zod before he destroys the planet. And before Jor-El can tell Clark the rest of the story and give Clark the Superman suit, a reporter named Lois Lane, who has secretly been following Clark, is attacked by the ship's security. Clark is forced to leave his father and save Lois, but after saving Lois, because he fears being discovered, Clark runs away. So Clark goes to the desert to train. Lois finds Clark in Smallville. Zod goes looking for the pod Clark came in. He threatens Martha Kent. Clark gets angry and starts a fight with Zod, Faora, and Namek in the middle of Smallville. Clark is not wearing the Superman suit because he never got it. He's wearing like gray sweatpants. Zod and his forces are wearing the Kryptonian armor, but they don't have capes. They fight in the middle of town. Clark is angry. He's not really caring about collateral damage. He wins the fight. Zod, Faora, and Namek retreat. Clark thinks he saved the day, but then when the dust settles, he realizes that all of the people of Smallville are scared of him because they just see him as another dangerous alien. Zod makes his announcement to the world and asks Clark to turn himself in. Clark does. Clark and Lois go on Zod's ship. Zod explains that he is going to destroy Earth to make a new Krypton, and Zod wants the codex that Jor-El stole. Lois, with the help of the Jor-El hologram, rescues Clark. Lois takes an escape pod out of the ship, but it malfunctions and Clark is forced to fly for the first time to save her, which teaches him that he is more powerful when he is saving people because he truly cares about humanity. Clark goes to the Fortress of Solitude and talks with the Jor-El hologram. Jor-El explains the Krypton failed as a society because everyone was bred with a purpose and they lost their humanity. Jor-El wanted Clark to be able to be whoever he wanted. Clark realizes that he really just wants to help, so he has Jor-El make him a Kryptonian suit with the symbol of the House of El, but Clark asks for it to be colored red and blue so that people associate Clark with first responders, like police officers, EMTs, and firefighters, to reinforce the idea that Clark is a helper. Then Clark travels to Kansas and Martha gives Clark a red childhood blanket to use as a cape so that everyone can see from a distance that Clark is different from Zod. Clark has finally become Superman. So we're at the third act, the resolution of our rewrite. We are going to answer the question posed at the end of Act 1. Can Clark stop Zod? And this act is, by far, the part of the real Man of Steel with which people have the most issues. And those issues all come from one moment, one decision, the snap. I guess we can't call it that anymore, gotta be more specific. The Metropolis City Shuffle. But for the purposes of this video, it's called the snap. But first, I need to cover the rest of the movie up until that point. And honestly, I wouldn't change all that much. Clark and Lois work with the army to stop the world engine. Clark goes to the Indian Ocean. Lois does not get on the plane. She explains how everything works and is with General Swanwick at a makeshift base of operations in Metropolis. Clark beats the machine, which I thought was a little underwhelming. Maybe that should have been Namek or something. The plane team blows up the world engine. They all die. All of that works. But let's talk about the snap. I don't believe the snap works for 3 reasons, and none of them are ideological. They all have to do with execution. First, I don't believe the snap carries as much symbolic weight as the movie thinks it does. I asked around on Twitter, twitter.com/NandoVMovies, please follow, looking for what you believed Clark killing Zod was meant to symbolize and why you believed it did or did not work. And a lot of you commented that Clark killing Zod symbolizes Clark choosing Earth over Krypton. And I believe it would if Clark didn't explicitly make that choice 10 minutes earlier. In The Real Man of Steel, Clark returns from the Indian Ocean, enters Zod's ship, and powers up his heat vision. Zod says, "If you destroy this ship, you destroy Krypton." Clark pauses and then says, "Krypton had its chance." And then he uses his heat vision to destroy the ship, dooming the Kryptonian babies inside. Even though I guess not, because they're kind of what we're using to make Doomsday and Batman v Superman. But as far as Clark knows, that's what's going on. This is about as explicit as you can get. Clark has chosen Earth and is fine with dooming Krypton. So Clark killing Zod later doesn't really tell us anything we don't already know. Second, the snap isn't consistent with some sort of no-kill philosophy. It doesn't come up. You would assume that Clark probably isn't a fan of killing, and it isn't his opening move, but killing Zod doesn't cross any sort of established moral line. I mean, Clark hasn't done any of this before. How does he know that knocking Namek into this power plant thing won't kill him, or repeatedly punching Zod won't kill him? Even when Clark downs the ship, he doesn't seem to know it won't kill Zod. It isn't a concern, which is fine. That's how a lot of these heroes operate, pretty much everyone except Batman. But that means that Clark killing his enemy in a completely justified situation isn't that big of a deal. That's why a lot of people say the snap felt like a beat that would fit more naturally into a sequel, one where Clark's moral code has been established and a manipulative villain like Lex challenges Clark's code, like how Joker challenges Batman in The Dark Knight. And speaking of sequels, the third reason the snap doesn't feel particularly important is that Batman v Superman, and even the scenes in Man of Steel that follow the snap, don't really acknowledge it. Batman v Superman is focused more on the destruction of the Zod fight. There isn't a moral dilemma associated with killing Zod, or even dooming Krypton. Every character, including Clark, seems to be on the same page about it. And in Man of Steel, the tone pretty abruptly shifts from Clark's anguish to Clark being an all-around good guy who feels comfortable talking with General Swanwick and gets a job at the Daily Planet. He doesn't mourn, he doesn't think about his decision, Clark just moves on with his life. Maybe if Man of Steel spent more time on the emotional ramifications of the Zod snap, it would leave an impact on the audience, but since the story drops that moment so quickly, it doesn't feel important. And beyond all of that, even if all of that did work perfectly, I don't think the snap would be compatible with my version of Man of Steel, because my version is about choice. In the beginning of the series, we talked about Clark's character arc and what makes a good character arc. A good arc is traditionally built of three parts: a goal, a truth, and a lie. Goal's pretty simple. Clark needs to stop Zod and save the people of Earth. But achieving that goal is hindered by the lie, that the people of Earth won't accept Clark and will see him as a monster. You are defined by how society sees you. Clark isn't able to embrace his heroism and become Superman because he's worried about what everyone else is thinking and who they think he is. And at the end of Act 2, Clark learned the lesson. He understands the truth. The choices you make determine who you are. Clark needs to take his destiny into his own hands if he wants to solve his problem. In the short term, that's stopping Zod, and in the longer term, it's finding his place in the world. And because choice is such a big part of this arc, the movie can't end with Clark not having a choice. Even if he makes the choice to accept that he doesn't have a choice, it's messy and inconsistent with this movie. So in this version, there is no snap. Clark is going to convince Zod of the error of his ways, and everyone will live happily ever after. Just kidding, Zod's dying, but the how is different. Clark flies into Metropolis just as Zod is about to shoot down the plane. He doesn't talk with Zod, Clark just hits the ship real hard and it falls out of the sky. The plane with the Phantom Drive is able to destroy the world engine. Clark doesn't catch Lois because she isn't on the ship. He just lands with the scout ship. And then, out of the rubble walks Zod. They talk a little about how Clark has destroyed the world engine and destroyed Zod's chance at building a new Krypton. Then they fight. And this fight is largely the same in the beginning. Lots of damage and destruction. Clark is trying to stop Zod, but Zod keeps getting the better of Clark. Clark is trying to get Zod out of the city, but it isn't working. Zod is too strong. Eventually, Clark does manage to get a hit in and pin Zod down, but then things get complicated. Zod uses his heat vision to cut the top off of a nearby crane. It teeters for a while and then starts to fall. Clark notices the crane and sees a crowd of fleeing people beneath it. Clark punches Zod and then flies over to catch the crane. We can see this from the people's perspective. They hear the crane above them, and just before it hits them, it is stopped in midair by Superman. Big hero moment. The people get out of the way, but before Clark can put the crane down safely, Zod flies in and tackles Clark. The fight continues. Again, they go at it, and it seems like Clark has Zod beat. Clark knocks Zod down to the street, and Zod slams into the ground, but before Clark can get to Zod, Zod kicks a car in the air towards another crowd of people. Clark rushes over, catches the car right before it lands on the people. Clark looks around, everyone's watching him, they aren't afraid, things are different. It is clear that Clark is there to help. Then Zod knocks Clark into the air, they square off like they do in the original Man of Steel, and Zod says, "There's only one way this ends, Cal. I will fulfill my purpose and rebuild Krypton on their graves." Clark recognizes that Zod isn't going to stop, and Zod's powers and disregard for human life make him too powerful to beat in this kind of fight. Clark needs to figure out another way to stop Zod. And then Clark gets an idea. He finds another way. He yells, "I can't stop you, but I can stop Krypton." And then, instead of flying over to Zod, Clark flies away from Zod. Zod is confused. And then Zod realizes what Clark is doing and gets scared. Zod desperately follows Clark. Lois and General Swanwick see Clark from the ground. The general says, "He's flying away." And then Lois says to herself, "I know where he's going." Then to the general, "Come on." Then Lois and the general get into a Humvee and start driving. And then we see that that Clark is flying towards the crashed Kryptonian scout ship. In this version, Clark didn't destroy the inside of the ship, so the ship's systems are still operational and the babies could conceivably still be alive. Clark flies into the ship and Zod chases after. They end up in a large room, and before Clark can do anything, Zod knocks him down. Clark slams into a wall and falls over. Zod says, "You were going to destroy Krypton to save them. You're a monster." And Clark slowly stands up smirking and says, "No, I wasn't. I'm not like you, and I never will be." Zod is confused. "Then why are you here?" And then Zod starts to feel a little sick, and he stumbles. "The ship's atmospheric composition neutralizes our powers. Here, we're just as weak as they are, and I'm gonna stop you." And listen, this isn't rocket science or me pulling this out of thin air. This is a concept the movie introduces us to pretty explicitly. The atmospherics in the Kryptonian spaceships can make you weaker. We are told and shown this. And yes, the scout ship doesn't neutralize Clark's powers in the beginning of the movie, but you can chalk that up to the scout ship not being activated. We'll just make a blanket rule for Kryptonian ships. If the ship is on, the atmospherics kick in. Think of it like air conditioning. It's a simple concept, and Clark re-explaining the concept to Zod should get everyone on board. And this could even maybe work with the actual Man of Steel. Like, Clark destroys some of this ship, but not necessarily all of it. You would assume the scout ship would have similar atmospherics to the world engine, and they could still be on. The way I think about it, the question should not be, is this the case? The question should be, could this be the case based on everything that's been established thus far in the movie? And if that were the case, would that make a better film? And in this scenario, I think it would for a few reasons. First, it creates some new stakes. Throughout this movie, Clark has been relatively safe. He's been in fights with robots and other Kryptonians, but at no point has the question of whether Clark will survive the fight ever really come up. Now, the drama will shift from, will Clark save the Earth, to, what will Clark need to give up to save it? And more importantly, this demonstrates that Clark has learned something. Originally, Clark was having trouble finding his place in the world. He didn't have a purpose and he wanted someone to give him one. Over the course of the movie, Clark learns that he needs to find his own purpose and decides to become Superman. And you can compare that journey to Zod, a Kryptonian that has a purpose and has had one since birth. Originally, that seemed like a good thing, but now Clark realizes that he can exploit Zod's need to protect Krypton to put Zod in a position he otherwise may have been smart enough to avoid. Zod's purpose is a weakness. Also, I think it's just cool that the finale to this big giant Superman movie is going to be a bare-knuckled fist fight, and Henry Cavill is great at those. So we get some dialogue. Zod walks towards Clark. We're going to move this line to here. "I was bred to be a warrior, Cal. Trained since birth to master my senses. Where did you train? On a farm?" Zod and Clark trade blows. Zod gets the better of Clark and knocks Clark down. "You're wearing his symbol? Tell me, how much hope is left on Krypton? You'll never stop me." Clark gets up. "Maybe not, but they will. They're stronger than you are, and if I can't stop you, they'll figure out a way." This makes Zod angry. "You're even more foolish than your father." Zod and Clark fight again. Zod knocks Clark down. Clark is pretty much done. Zod grabs a sword-like piece of debris and stabs Clark through the chest with it. Not like through his heart, but just, a stab. "I was going to keep you alive. I was going to make you watch." Zod pulls the metal out of Clark's chest and gets ready to cut Clark's throat. Clark secretly grabs a small dagger-shaped piece of metal, but Zod kicks it out of Clark's hands. "But now, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to rip that codex from your bones. And then I'm going to destroy this planet and everyone on it. This new Krypton will be a monument to your failure." And right as Zod is about to stab Clark, you hear a gunshot. And behind Zod, we see Lois and General Swanwick. They're wearing those Kryptonian helmets, and Swanwick is holding a pistol. Zod looks down, sees a large gunshot wound in his chest. Zod drops the sword, falls to the ground. And now, Lois on the ship earlier is part of a setup to this moment. Lois didn't just go with Clark on the ship to save him, she also needed to learn how to get onto the ship to save Clark later in the movie. And I know people are going to be mad that Lois and the General killed Zod, but I don't really care. I want this to be the "you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us," New Yorkers throwing tire irons at the Green Goblin moment. Clark has earned the trust of the General and the rest of the people of Earth. They know Clark is on their side. That trust is what makes the difference in the fight with Zod. And yeah, Clark wasn't counting on Lois and the General showing up at that moment, but Clark knew that if he got Zod into a position where he was vulnerable, someone else may be able to help. Lois and the General help Clark up and walk him out of the ship. Clark gets up and starts to fly away, still very badly injured. Lois asks, "Where are you going?" And Clark says, "To help." Then Lois grabs and kisses Clark, and Clark flies away. Now we get 30 seconds of Clark flying around helping people, like a first responder at Ground Zero, a little like this moment from a Spider-Man comic. I think it's important to show Clark helping with the cleanup. Batman v Superman missed that after the Capitol explosion, which was especially frustrating since the extended edition has a scene where Clark is helping. A little bit of that goes a long way to show where Clark's priorities are. And if only there was someone who who could use saving. Some named character we met earlier who Superman could help that would mean something to the audience. So yeah, in this version, Jenny hasn't yet been saved. Clark is going to spot her with X-ray vision, fly over, and lift the rubble that's trapping Jenny. And in this moment, Jenny, Doug, and most importantly, Perry White are going to see Superman helping. And this is going to make a big impact on them. They know the real Superman, the Superman Clark has chosen to be. So this continues for a bit. We'll go back to Smallville for the grave scene, and then Martha asks Clark what he's going to do now. Clark says that he's going to work at the Daily Planet, and then we see this, the last scene of the movie. Which means, yeah, we're cutting the scene where Clark downs the Predator drone. Thank God. That scene is not good. Besides how it makes Clark feel like kind of a jerk, it is a huge tonal shift from the scene before it, and it feels like nothing more than a backtrack. Like, is Superman going to be emotionally scarred and distant after killing Zod and ending the Kryptonian race? Nah, he's fine, and he loves everybody. You happy? Please, what do you want us to do? Finally, Clark goes to the Daily Planet and walks to Perry's office. Perry says, "Come in." "Clark, I'd like to introduce you to our new photographer." Jimmy Olsen stands up. Jimmy Olsen." Clark asks, "Photographer?" Perry cuts in, "Yeah, Jimmy here is the one who got the picture." Clark is confused. Perry points to a framed newspaper with the headline, "Superman Stops Alien Invasion," and underneath it is a picture of the car catch moment from earlier that looks just like the cover of Action Comics 1. Clark says, "Oh, that picture." Which, not to nitpick, not unlike my podcast, mostly nitpicking, you know the drill. What is Superman doing in this cover? It looks like he's using the car to smash the mountain? Why? Did the car do something wrong? Is the mountain made of kryptonite? It doesn't matter, but it does confuse me. In the picture on the newspaper, it will be clear that Superman is protecting people from being hit by a flying car, not whatever this is. And let's hang on Jimmy for a second. You may not realize this, but this guy who is killed in the beginning of Batman v Superman is actually supposed to be Jimmy Olsen, Superman's best friend. He's a CIA operative who is executed 5 minutes into the movie. When people ask me why I don't think these movies worked, I point to this: killing Jimmy Olsen for no good reason. Because according to Zack Snyder, they couldn't fit him into these movies and they wanted to have fun with him. So he gets shot. And I'm not saying that you can't kill Jimmy Olsen or anything like that, but the people behind Batman v Superman not being able to figure out something interesting to do with Clark Kent's best human friend in a movie about Superman being disconnected from society, so they kill that character unceremoniously, is a pretty perfect example for why some of these movies don't work. Anyway, Perry says, "Jimmy's starting today too. You guys have orientation together. Here, I'll show you around the bullpen." Jimmy says to Clark, "Oh, you kind of look like him." Clark gets a little worried. "Oh, really?" Jimmy says, "Yeah, he's much taller though." Clark makes that face like, And then, as we're leaving Perry's office, Clark bumps into Lois. We get their meeting, which is the last line of the original movie. "Hi, I'm Clark Kent, Lois Lane. Welcome to the planet." Credits. So, stick around through these credits. I have a post-credit scene that I think would be a perfect way to end this movie. As always, thank you to everyone who continues to support the channel on Patreon. You guys are the best. If you want to see your name up here, get access to videos early, other cool stuff, like a couple weeks ago, we got patron number 400. So we did a Q&A, which was a lot of fun. We're going to do one of those every 100 patrons. So if you want to watch that Q&A and be part of patron exclusive Q&As in the future, throw in literally any amount of money at patreon.com/NandoViewMovies. Also, I don't think I've made this super clear, but if you don't want your name up here, you could totally do that too. There's an option for it. Either way, patreon.com/NandoViewMovies. You have no idea how much I appreciate it. Also, I want to give a huge thank you to the sponsor for this video and the last 3 Man of Steel videos, Squarespace. Squarespace gives you a powerful and beautiful online platform from which to create your website. You can use it to create any kind of website if you're a musician or a designer or an artist or a podcaster. They have tons of award-winning designer templates, so designing everything is easy. It looks great right from the start. And they've got an all-in-one platform, so you never need to upgrade it, you never need to patch it. That's all done for you, and they have award-winning 24/7 support. And if you would also like to start creating your new website, go to squarespace.com/Nando, Nando, to get a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. Okay, post-credit scene. Clark makes a phone call. Martha picks up on the other end. "Oh, Clark, how is everything in Metropolis?" "It's good. First day went well. Met some nice people." "And the girl?" "Yeah, she was there too. How's Smallville doing?" "It's getting better. No one was all that hurt. We'll be all right." "Now about the damage." "It's all getting cleaned up." "Government?" "No, a company. Swooped in. Gonna do it all for free. Trucks have been coming in all morning." Then a truck passes Kent Farm and it approaches the city. We can see Smallville on the horizon. Tons of construction. They're building a bunch of new modern buildings. And the truck passes a sign that reads, "Welcome to Smallville, the city of tomorrow. Renovations courtesy of LexCorp."